For this project, I initially wasn't entirely sure what I wanted to do. I thought up a bunch of different ideas that would look interesting in 3D, but I had a hard time finding a data set that would fit any of my ideas. I figured it would be best to decide on an idea for my data set before even considering implementing it into a 3D form. I initially wanted to cover the 3 major universities in Alberta and the main areas they placed their funding. I ended up scrapping this idea since I had a very hard time finding any concrete data for the topic. I then settled on the topic of natural gas prices in comparison with Alberta's unemployment rates for the past 10 years. The main reason I chose this topic was because I had found a very good website that had all of the data I required readily available. The website I used was the Government of Alberta's Economic Dashboard. Both the natural gas prices and the unemployment rate pages had a ton of data for every month dating back many years. I decided to use the data from the past 10 years because I wanted to showcase the 2 major crashes in Alberta's economy during 2009 and 2016. Because all the data I was planning to use was represented with line graphs, I figured that it would be interesting if I kept the integrity of those lines and found a way to represent them as a printed 3D model. I decided to use a cylinder-shaped base because it reminded me of gas pipelines, and it would also be very easy to split into different sections to represent different years. The website I found was awesome because it showed all of the numerical values correlated with each point on the line graph. As both the natural gas price and unemployment rate graphs had values for every month of each year, it proved to be easy to compare the different datasets. I took all of the values and put them into an Excel spreadsheet so that I could easily access the data when I began building the 3D model. I decided to split the cylinder into 5 sections, each displaying 2 years' worth of data. This was to give the lines being represented more variation. One of the biggest problems I ran into was accurately representing the different datasets in relation to one another. The scales of the numerical values were different between the natural gas price data and the unemployment rate data. The scale of the natural gas data ranged from 0 to 10, whereas the unemployment data ranged from 3 to 9. I wanted each of the lines to be as dramatic as possible, but in order to scale the data accurately while comparing them to one another, I had to place both datasets on a scale from 0 to 10. This meant that the unemployment rate data wouldn't appear to have as many dramatic drops as the natural gas price data. I then began building the 3D model. Another big problem I ran into was determining how big I could make the model. I wasn't entirely sure of the maximum size that the 3D printer was able to print, so I just ended up guessing. Due to the fact that I wanted the data to extend from the cylinder base, I had to match the scale of the numerical values with a measurement of length. I needed each of the ranging values from the datasets to be represented by lengths that would be fairly obvious to notice just by looking at it. I initially tried to represent the data range with 30 centimeters, but soon realized it would be way too big to print. So I brought it down to 10 centimeters, where one whole number would equate to being raised 1 centimeter from the base of the cylinder. Once I had all the data built into the model, I began thinking of ways to label the information so that it would be more evident for the viewers. I decided to add text on the top portion of the model displaying the years each section represented. I chose a clear material for the model to be printed with so that the viewer could somewhat see through the raised areas to help compare the different datasets. I then had to do a bit of sanding on the printed model, mainly to clean up the edges, but I also had to sand down the text I created because it was too small. Instead, I opted to just write the dates on the model. I also decided to color the edges of the model to help bring attention to the data being represented. I tried using Sharpies and different colors of paint, but I ended up settling on green and orange paint because they stood out the best on the clear plastic. Overall, I found this project to be immensely more difficult in comparison to the past projects. This is mainly because I don't think I was quite used to the idea of finding ways to represent data in a 3-dimensional format. Using the datasets that I ended up working with, I believe that I was quite successful in making the information immensely more interesting and interactive for the viewer than it is in 2 dimensions.